Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show for my Security Plus study group for today. We're about 10 minutes away from getting started. So if you're watching this on the replay and you're wondering, why am I looking at the back of everything? Don't worry. Once we start the replay, once we start the show, you'll see me. For the pre-show, it's 10 minutes of me trying to make sure everything is working, which I think we're doing a pretty good job today. If you're here live, thank you for joining us. Of course, the live chat is always available on my site at professormesser.com/live. If you're on the YouTube and you're live and you're noticing there's no chat there, because there's not a chat there, I've disabled it in the YouTube so I can concentrate on a single chat. We'll see if that helps. I think it will. We've got plenty of Security Plus Q&A in the first hour. In the second hour, we open up the phone lines and take questions from the chat room if you have any. Or we don't, or we all go home. Thanks for coming, everybody. We're done, or not. We'll see. Usually there's a couple of questions, so we'll see how that goes. I can always talk for an hour, just on anything. So there's always that. I'm not sure that's compelling, visual or audio, but there it is nonetheless. There's some folks in the chat room. We're going to bring up the links to the live stream there. There we go. Had it ready to go. Just pasted it in. I think our cameras are pretty good shape. I already did a camera check. I already recorded the podcast intros, which you can, of course, get on the podcast side at professormesser.com/podcast. So this will be Security Plus today. We've got this angle on this camera is kind of weird. It looks like everything's kind of tilted, but it's up higher, and it is relatively straight. I guess I could even tilt it back. This looks like it's like leaning off the side of the boat, but it's perfectly straight to me. If I was to straighten, what is straight? Straight is like that, and that's it's tilted like at a crazy angle. Just because that's the way we got the camera set up. I need to do some adjustments anyway. All new cameras. Yeah, what is that, a boat? Hello, everyone. Welcome, chat room. Hi, everybody. We've got a few minutes before we get started. Another 7.5. So we get those things going. I think we're in good shape here. I have to bring up my phone. Let's make sure it's on the quiet side. There we go. We're going to mute that too. I'm going to stick that right there and see how that goes. All right. We have plenty to go through today. I've got all Security Plus questions. We've got all new questions, of course. New questions every time. Plenty of those things to go through. So hopefully we'll be able to get through all of that. I've got recordings going. We're going to do a quick sanity check. That's a little Cylon that's down here that's circling around are my video recordings. I'm doing a video recording in front of me. There's another video recording going on the streaming server that is in the data center, which is a closet right over there. And that is also recording. I'm really recording too many things here. Really, those two and the streaming server are probably the best. Welcome, Garland, Texas. It's in the chat room. Welcome. Folks are checking in now. Folks are showing up. The emails and the blasts will go out in another minute and 15 seconds, and then there'll be this flood of folks that shows up. Gets those going. Let's have a look quickly, make sure everybody's seeing everything okay on the YouTube. It looks like you are. We'll leave that right there so I can check the status as we're going along. We've got this. Good. Philippines is here. Colorado's checking in. Montgomery is here. El Paso, Texas is here. Dallas. A lot of Texas checking in. The Bahamas are here. North Dakota. Very nice. I don't know if one day I will run the show or Al will, because I don't know Al. Maybe it will. Maybe I should have an AI. It's all going to be that Apple chat person talking thing. It'll just be me talking, and there will be something there. Then I wouldn't have to. I would just be in a t-shirt and shorts at that point. I don't have to dress up. Greece is here. Welcome. Virginia's checking in. Louisiana. Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Pennsylvania is here. PA. Maryland, my Maryland is also here. Got that going on. Arizona, It's earlier now in the morning as we go further west. Colorado and Ohio is also here. So a lot of folks, we've got a lot of folks from all over in the chat. Of course, for the after show, when I take phone calls, all of those, it's on a telephone. It uses telephone numbers, and those numbers are good in the continental U.S., but you can also use Skype if you're elsewhere outside, or I guess you could use Skype inside the United States as well if you really, really wanted to. So that's how that works anyway. New York is here, or maybe just New York. I don't know if it's New York, or just New York. Sputnik is from New York. Chicago, welcome. Washington, D.C. I've been roaming around Washington, D.C. virtually over the last week, trying to, in the new Division II, feel like I'm there. Feel like I was just there last night, and now I'm here in Florida. NYC, New York. Yes, good. That's excellent. South Africa, welcome. Good name. James in South Africa. I like it. New Hampshire, Norfolk. Florida is here again. We've got all kinds of more Florida. Lots of Florida. Jersey is here. Welcome, New Jersey. We've got a lot going on. There is, let me do a quick sanity check here. Audio is set right. Actually, it's not set right because it's way over here. Let me bring my mixer a little closer to the action. There we go. See how much better that is? We will need that in the after show so I can pot up and pot down the calls. The potentiometer. North Carolina, welcome. Fayetteville and Raleighwood. Now, is there a Raleighwood and not just Raleigh? I'm not familiar. I could either be completely off the mark or have learned something today. RTP, excellent. Atlanta is here. I miss going up to Atlanta. I need to do more Atlanta trips. I used to go there every week or so. Back when I worked for someone else, I would be there every week, it seems. That was fun. I liked Atlanta. I like the people in Atlanta. Panama City, welcome. I got kinfolk there, as we like to say here in the South. I got kin. You got kin there? I don't know who kin is. That's not what they were saying. I didn't understand when I was little. Who's kin? What are you talking about? Netherlands, welcome. Portland, Maine, East Coast. East Coast, Portland. Houston is here. A lot of Texas here. More Atlanta. More PA. Oh, so Security Plus coming up for you. April is when you're scheduled. So this will be a good check-in. We'll get see how well you're doing with these questions I have today. I have a mix of questions. Some are, I tried to make it a little harder. Some are probably easier. We'll have to see. I never know exactly how it's going to go before I ask the question. So we'll have to see. Phoenix is here. Charleston, South Carolina. I have some friends in Charleston. We got to get up there. Chicago again. Lots of Chicago. Chicago in the news this week for the Big Green River because it was the St. Patrick's Day in Chicago. And well, it's St. Patrick's Day everywhere, but especially in Chicago. All right. We'll figure out all of those things. Welcome, Denver. Haven't been to Denver in a while either. That was one of the last trips I did when working for someone else was a Denver trip. In fact, that was my first time there. Oddly enough, I don't get out to the west as much as I do the East Coast, just because of the way things always worked out with what I did and what my territory was and that kind of thing. We were just never sure. We're starting here in just a few minutes. Corey is in Tallahassee. Welcome, a local. That's, we'll see how the internet goes. Usually it's pretty good. I have a nice big Comcast connection here, so we're going to see how well this works out. It's been doing very well recently. Let's make sure we can play here. That looks good. We're kind of set here. That's good. That ready to go. I think we're pretty much ready to get started. We'll get the Security Plus underway. First hour's Q&A. Stick around for the second hour. We'll do phone calls. And then I think we'll be pretty much set. I think that is a great way to go. So let's get it going here. let's get started, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2019 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group from the world headquarters here at Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. So nice to have you here. We're chatting with everyone in the chat room, going back and forth. There are people all over the world who like to stop in once a month and go through Security Plus questions. Thank you for being here. We could not do this without you. We've got a lot of questions to go through today, a lot that you've already put into the chat room. We'll be circling back on a number of those, but I'll be asking you interactive questions here in this first hour, and you'll be answering the questions live and online through the magic of the internet. I will tell you exactly how to make that happen in just a few minutes. Don't worry. Now, we're able to do this thanks for your ongoing support. Of course, all of my Security Plus videos, every minute of every video is available for you to watch absolutely free on the internet. You can go out anytime and see any of them. There's no registration. They're not behind a paywall. They're not hidden somewhere. It's on YouTube. It's in a playlist. And of course, you can come to my website where you get the video and the transcript right underneath. Of course, some people like to have an offline version of this. I have offline versions available for sale. You can get a digital video version. You can get a physical version where I send you a USB key. You can get the audio-only version. There are course notes. All of these things can be found on my website at professormesser.com/getsecplus. And you can learn all about those things. Of course, we're always doing something here. You can follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram. You simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you're hoping to find me on. So professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/ who knows what you'll find. There's probably only 3 or 4 things. Let's not think that there's 100 different options there, because there isn't. But you can always go to YouTube and subscribe to us in YouTube. So go to professormesser.com/YouTube. You'll find all of the Security Plus videos there. There's also an audio version of this study group available. If you'd like to have a podcast version, you have a podcast catching program that can grab these podcasts and automatically download them to your mobile device. So you can listen in your car, you can listen while you're biking, you listen while you're working out, whatever you'd like to do. The audio only version is available at professormesser.com/podcast. Of course, the video version of this is always available immediately afterwards if all things go well. Usually it takes a couple of minutes for YouTube to do its work there, but as soon as they finish in a couple of minutes, they make the video version of this available to you on the YouTube. And if you do go out to YouTube, about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, will have to watch this entire video. And she goes through and marks all of the timestamps for everything that we do. So if you're thinking, I need to look at that 4th question that we did last month, you can go to last month, click on the timestamp of the 4th question. It takes you right there. And she also goes through all of the calls afterwards, and that's all on YouTube. Those usually available about a day afterwards. Depends on how our scheduling is going. But that's something that's kind of nice. You can go back in the archive, and for about a year's worth of these, you can find that, which is kind of nice. We're going to talk about Security Plus today, though. It's all about the SY0501 Security Plus, which is the current version of the exam. It was released in October of 2017. So we're not even a year and a half old yet with this. There's plenty on the SY0501 that you need to know about. So all of your study materials should say Security Plus SY0501. They should not say SY0401. They should not say 301 or previous. They really must say SY0501. You do not want to walk into your exam having studied for the wrong version of that exam. That would be really bad, especially in the SY0501, which was a very different certification than the SY0401. You will be very, very surprised if you walk in on that. Fortunately, it's a single exam, so you don't have to take multiple tests and get all the way through them. It's a single exam. It's 90 minutes long. You might get 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. You never know how it's going to go. The passing score is kind of odd. CompTIA doesn't tell you exactly how they do their testing scoring. So between a 100 and 900, you need to get a 750. See how easy that is? So we don't know. Each question's worth a different number. We're just never sure exactly how that's going to go. The questions themselves are for multiple choice, mostly multiple choice, but the first set of questions you get, the first handful of questions you get, will be what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. These are questions that are not multiple choice. They're anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could be a matching question. You might be dragging and dropping. There might be putting things in order from fastest to slowest, highest to lowest. We're never exactly sure what you will be asked, but the content of the performance-based questions comes directly from the exam objectives. So that way, you know, at least, even if it's not multiple choice, you're still having to provide the same information that you had from the exam objectives. So they're not going to throw things at you you're not expecting. It's just a different way of asking the question. We're going to ask questions this morning as well. I have a performance-based question for you coming up, so stick around for that. The way that you're able to answer questions today, if you are watching this live, is you can pop open a new browser window and go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. QA stands for question answer. Somebody reminded me that's what that stands for. That will take you to a page on a third-party service called Socrative that allows us to do this live and in-person, real-time question and answer. And you will see a question's already waiting for you there. It's a question from last month. So you'll see there's a question. It's our test to see if you're able to get in. There's also an app you can load up on your mobile device. It's the Socrative Student app. That's the one you want. There's a Socrative Teacher app. That's the one for me. Socrative Student app is the one for you. And then we'll ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right. ProfessorMesser. So the O's and the E's and the number of F's is important. That's a critical piece of this. And if you are able to do that and everything works properly for you, you will see a question that we had last month. We call this our rewind question, just to get you into it, just to see what you remember, just to see if you're able to answer the question. This month's question on the rewind is: a company would like to build their own inventory management system, but they would prefer using a predefined set of application modules. Which cloud deployment model would facilitate this software development strategy? And if everything is looking fine on your screen, you will have an option or a set of options that is IaaS, SaaS, hybrid, PaaS, or community. Those are your 5 options. So for those of you listening on the podcast, I'll go through them slowly. It's IaaS, SaaS, hybrid, PaaS, and community. Yes, I'm not saying those properly. There's better ways to say that, but I'm intentionally not doing that. So you know how this goes. You have to answer, and you can see interactively, we can see the answers coming up here. Now, one of the things that we will do when we're actually live and doing this in a couple of minutes, don't put your answer in the chat room. Don't put any hints in the chat room. We're all going to pretend that we're sitting there at the exam and we have no resources available. You will not Google, no Googling. You will try to answer to the best of your ability. And we'll see how we get there with these. This is obviously a multiple choice question. This is the kind that you will get for the majority of your exam. Some people in the chat room are saying, well, how many of those performance-based questions should we expect to get? And it's usually about a handful. So usually it's plus or minus 5 or so. Could be less, could be more. You just never know exactly. Everybody's test is a little bit different. So let's go through these questions. It looks like most of you are in here and answering. So let's quickly go through the answer. A company would like to build their own inventory management system, but would prefer using a predefined set of application modules. Which cloud deployment model would facilitate the software development strategy? Well, if you're talking about software development, it's probably not going to be software as a service or SaaS. Software as a service is one where all of the work has already been done for you. You simply log in and you use the service. Think of Google Mail. You're not programming Google Mail. You're not doing your own setup of Google Mail. You are simply logging into Google Mail and you take what they get you. That's it. You don't have many choices and you can't do it really much. There's no development and there's very little options really. Google Mail, you read your mail, you delete your mail, you go to the next thing. Hopefully you delete your mail. The other option on here that 55% of you did say SaaS, but 36% of you said platform as a service or PaaS. Platform as a service is the one we were looking for. That's one where you're doing your own development process. But instead of building an entire application from the ground up, they effectively give you building blocks. This is the Lego version of cloud computing, where they give you all the blocks you need. Well, we need a login screen. Well, here's your login screen block. Okay, once they log in, This is for inventory management, so we need a block that allows people to add and remove inventory. Well, we've got a block for that. Here's your inventory block. Oh, that was easy. And then once they do that, we need to check and make sure if we have inventory in stock. Well, here's your check inventory in stock block. And you're done. Now you've made your app. Well, it's a little more involved in that, but that's the idea. You don't have to build all of this information from the bottom up. You don't have to be your own development team. You might need a developer to help you, but you don't have to build from scratch. All of these modules are pre-built, which is beautiful. It's so easy to be able to do that. And that's why in this particular case, platform as a service is indeed the right answer. 37% of you, I didn't quite hit that 50% mark. So that was a new question for many of you. You didn't get this one last month, or like me, you forgot what you did last month and you didn't remember that it was platform as a service, but indeed that was the right answer, platform as a service. We have all new questions for you this month. Do not worry. We have plenty of things to go through. But as I mentioned, the very first question, very similar to the first questions you're going to get on your exam, is a performance-based question. And I made this one a little more difficult than previous performance-based questions I've done. Your feedback has come right to me and said, no, make it hard. So I made this one a little bit harder. It's not super hard, but it's a little bit harder than some you've seen previously. This question is a fill in the blank. This could almost as easily be a drag and drop. So, or one that you're choosing from a set of pull down options. You never know exactly the user interface that CompTIA will give you to be able to do this. But this is one where I'm doing as a fill in the blank so that you can actually type the answers in on Socrative if you would like to. No requirement for that, of course, but here is your performance-based question of the month. And it asks, provide the appropriate multi-factor authentication type for each of these descriptions. And notice that I'm not giving you what the possible multi-factor authentication types are. You've got a multi-factor authenticate type and know what those are in your head already. But here are the different descriptions. We'll go through each one. There are 6 of them. The first is use your face to unlock a mobile phone. What multi-factor authentication type is that? Second one is sign a receipt when using a credit card. Some of us still do that. We have to sign receipts. Log into Windows with a username and password. So what would the multi-factor authentication type be for that? The fourth option is receive an SMS code during login. The fifth one is use a PIN at the ATM. And the last one is slide a smart card into a laptop. All of these are authentication methods. Most of these are authentication methods we use all the time. Some of these are unique, but I want to know which ones each one of these happens to belong to. Now you'll notice, and this will be your hint for these multi-factor authentication types, some types will be used more than once. That's the only hint I'll give you. Some of these multi-factor authentication types will be used more than once in this list. Some multi-factor authentication types that you probably are very familiar with may not be mentioned at all. So I did make this one a little more difficult. You really have to go through each one and really know what authentication factor type is this and really break these down. Most of you are doing pretty well. I'm watching the answers come in. If you can see the reflection in my glasses, you can see, hopefully you can't. You can see some of these coming through. These obviously are, you need 6 different answers, but some of these answers will be repeated. So if you want to answer, you go down here to the bottom where it says professormesser.com/QA. Pop open a new browser window. Go to professormesser.com/QA. And of course, don't answer in the chat room. No hints in the chat room. We're going to figure out all of this. So if you're very familiar with multi-factor authentication, you're going to do fine on this question. If you're not that familiar, you might be learning something on this one. So hopefully you'll be able to do that. This is one of those things, though, that once you start getting familiar with what's going to be asked of you on this exam, some of these will be very easy. This could have been a multiple choice question, or it could have made a drag and drop where I give you all of the options and you just drag the right ones in. So that's one of those that should help you out. So that's good. You should be able to step through these. And if you think they're easy, then you're in good shape. It's really great if you're going through a question, you think this question is so easy, fantastic. You have done the right things with your studying. But this should be a question where you do have to at least know this topic to be able to answer. You can't walk in off the street and be able to do that. A number of you answered this one, though. So, well, we still have a few of these coming in. Some of you submitted the answers and you weren't done yet. That's okay. Make a note of what they are as well, because when you submit it, you can't see it online. One of the idiosyncrasies of this online system that we're using. This software as a service that I'm using for our online system does not allow me any development. It is not a platform as a service, so I cannot customize the code. It is a software as a service. When you submit it, your answer goes away, and that's what you get. That's hopefully that software platform thing's working out for you. Let's go through each one of these, though. We'll be able to figure this out. Let's go through each one of these. This, by the way, comes directly from the SY0501 section 4.1. If you'd like to see more details of these specific answers, the video you're looking for is one called AAA and Authentication. And I go through each one of these. So let's start with our first one, which asks, use your face to unlock a mobile phone, which sounds rude, but actually is pretty normal. It's not, you're not using, it sees your face. A camera looks at your face. You're not actually pushing the phone into your face. You knew that, though. This is something you are. So this is a type of, if you will, biometric in many ways. It's who you are. The authentication is actually part of you. You don't have to remember anything. You don't have to have anything with you to be able to do this, although obviously you need your phone, but the phone is not the authentication. Your face is the authentication. If you held your phone up to someone else, it would not unlock. So this really is something that you are. The next one we'll look at is sign a receipt when using a credit card. And as I mentioned, signing a receipt. Some of you do this. Some of you sign receipts when using a credit card. Signing a receipt is something you do. We are ideally checking your signature to see if the thing that you do is the same every time when you do it. And a signature is one of those things that is very commonly something that you do. So the idea, of course, being that it'd be very difficult for someone else to sign your name exactly the way you do it. So it makes a relatively good authentication method, at least for credit cards, an okay method. You do have to check the signature. And of course, these days, we're moving away from signatures entirely for most of those things. Our third description is log into Windows with a username and a password. Now, we have to know our username and we have to know our password. So it's something that we know. So that's how you figure out which authentication type it is. We definitely know the authentication type if we have our username and our password. Let's look at the fourth one, which is receive an SMS code during login. You've probably seen this where you're logging in, you put in your username and password, and then it says, now type in the SMS code we just sent to your phone. And by the way, security professionals right now are cringing at even mentioning this because, as many of us know in the security industry, this is not a very secure way of doing multi-factor authentication. In fact, most organizations will not do SMS during login because it's so easy to intercept and or spoof. So that's not a great thing to do either. So receiving an SMS code during login, although people don't like it in security, I'm still getting services that ask me to do this. So it's one of those multi-factor authentication types we do need to know. And because it's sending it to us, it's something, and it's on our phone, we have to have our phone to be able to receive this SMS. It's something we have, interestingly enough. Well, it makes sense. It's not who we are. It's not something we do. It's not something we know. It's not somewhere we are. It's really something we have. And anytime your phone is involved in that authentication process, it's something that you have. You have your phone. If you did not have your phone, you would not be able to authenticate. Next one is use a PIN at the ATM, a personal identification number. We have to type that in. We put our card in and we type in the PIN number. Using the PIN is something we know. Using the card that we put into the ATM is something we have. So that's our multi-factor when we show up at the automatic teller machine, is that we have those two methods to hopefully authenticate and use together. And the last one, sliding a smart card into a laptop. Very common to see on highly secure environments where there is a certificate on that smart card that is associated with you. You're trying to log into a laptop. You put in your username, you put in your password, and it says, well, just to make sure you're you, take your smart card, slide it into the laptop. And not a lot of laptops have that smart card slot available by default, but at places that are high security are buying laptops where the smart card is available. And surprising how many laptop models have a smart card version just for that. Well, if we have our smart card, then it's something we have. So those last four were duplicated, something you know and something you have. We saw twice. Now, if you went through this list and you weren't quite certain what we were talking about from the beginning, or you weren't quite sure about how these different authentication types work together, make sure you check out the video. That's section 4.1. That's the 4.1 in your CompTIA exam objectives, by the way. So you can always go back to the objectives and see where those are. And the video that happens to go over this is AAA and authentication. Hopefully you did well on that. Obviously, because this is a fill in the blank, we can't look at the results, how everyone did, but we'll be able to do that with some multiple choice ones coming up soon. Hopefully you did well with that one. And if you didn't, it's an opportunity now to go back and learn more about multi-factor authentication, because I assure you, in the world of IT security, you will be dealing with multi-factor authentication a lot in many, many different ways. Let's shift gears now and do a multiple choice question. I think everybody would like to get back to the multiple choice side of things. I've got a question for you that asks, which of these activities would be categorized as passive reconnaissance? Which of these activities would be categorized as passive reconnaissance? And I have 5 options for you. Those 5 options are reading online forums, scanning for open ports, running DNS queries, running ping sweeps, or performing OS fingerprinting. So we've got 5 things here that we could choose from. I think there may be even a conversation we can have where 2 of these could possibly be correct, but I'm really looking for the best possible answer here. The first one is reading online forums. The second one is scanning for open ports. The third one is running DNS queries. The fourth one is running ping sweeps. And the fifth one is performing OS fingerprinting. All of those things are need to be considered if you're trying to determine, is it passive reconnaissance or is it not passive reconnaissance? Your options are there on the screen. So make sure you lock in your answer. You remember what your answer is, and you can lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. Make sure that you do not put the answer in there. This is all something you should, of course, look at and consider. All 5 of those options and answer them at professormesser.com/QA. Again, no answering the chat room. We'll figure out all of those things that we have there. I'm going to make sure that I have the right things on my screen so I can see all of those different pieces. This is one where you do get into this quite a bit. Many of you are very familiar with wanting to do more penetration testing, reconnaissance. This is the type of question that leads you down that road. Of course, I have many things I can tell you about pen testing and whether it's viable or not. It's completely viable as a career choice. So these may be some of the things that you run into if you're lucky enough to get into that very niche area of IT security. Let's see how we did with this one. We've had a number of you answer. So let's click the How Do We Do button. And here we are. We've got, we hit that 50% number. 53% of you say that it's A, reading online forums. But 30% of you say scanning for open ports. So I guess we could go back and forth over those 2 things, over what it could be. Because all of the rest are single digits. 6% of you said performing OS fingerprinting. 5% said running ping sweeps. And 4% said running DNS queries. Interestingly enough, the 2 answers that I thought would come up as the 2 most popular were not these 2. One of them is, the second one is not. And then I'll talk in a moment on how I could take partial credit on one of these. We'll talk about what these happen to be as we step through them and figuring out those details. Let's talk about, though, passive reconnaissance and what this happens to be. So the idea with passive reconnaissance is you're able to gather information without the person that you're investigating knowing that you're doing it. There would be no possible way for the person or thing that you're investigating to ever know that you're actually doing the investigation. That's what passive reconnaissance is. That's really the best way to go about looking at this. So that's one where if you get into trying to figure out how do I figure out what's passive and what isn't passive, that is really the focus, is those two things, is understanding what would be passive. Well, looking at someone's social media page. For the most part, most social media sites will not tell you who's looking at your page. That's not always true, of course. If you are on LinkedIn, of course, you can see when people are looking at your page. And LinkedIn even gives you an option for paying a little bit more and seeing exactly the name of the person who's looking at their page. So you do have those options available on LinkedIn, but other places such as Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, you have no idea really who might be looking at your information. So that's one thing to consider. If they have a corporate website, nobody's really being able to tie back exactly what's going on, who's looking at a corporate website, not generally speaking. There are analytic tools that can provide an overview of who may be looking at your website from a particular part of the world. But of course, you can, if you're a very good person who's doing reconnaissance, you've already gone through a VPN that's in another country and coming back to this country to look at their webpage anyway. So hopefully you're considering doing that. Obviously, if you're reading Reddit, you're going through online forums and looking at other online websites. Those are not directly connected to the person or the thing or the company that you're investigating. So that's one where it's completely passive. They don't know that you are doing it. And that's why it's a good example of something that might be passive. Social engineering, another good way, especially if it's not directly to the company or the person that you're investigating, but you're calling somewhere else to gather information about them, that could be considered passive reconnaissance. And dumpster diving, going through someone's trash, is very passive. As long as they don't see you picking the trash up or don't see you going through their dumpster. We mentioned in another video on the Security Plus course that going through the dumpster, a lot of companies protect their dumpsters. They put fences around them to make sure that people don't do this, and being able to see that. And of course, there are other business organizations or people you can talk to. That's a very passive way to go about and gather this information. So based on what we know about passive reconnaissance, we can go through this list that we have here, and we know that reading online forums, especially online forums that are not in any way associated with that company, maybe their subreddit on reddit.com, is a very good way to do some passive reconnaissance. Now, what about these other things listed here? Why are none of these things passive? Well, let's step through them very quickly. For example, scanning for open ports. Well, if you're performing a port scan using something like Nmap, that's probably one of the most popular ways to perform port scans, you are actually sending traffic to that user's machine, and that machine is responding back to you. There's nothing passive about that. You are actively inquiring to that computer, what ports do you have available, and that computer's responding back to you. Now, most people who have a firewall and IPS these days, they can see when a port scan is occurring. Unless most port scans are scanning thousands of ports in a very short period of time. So it's very easy to see on my logs, the port scan just occurred. And we can see that type of thing. That happens all the time. And it's a very active way of providing reconnaissance. It's not passive in any way, shape, or form. Running DNS queries is also a very active reconnaissance method. We are effectively querying someone's DNS server and gathering information from it. And if you're doing some reconnaissance, then you're asking for more than just the IP address of a single work device that you happen to have a name for. You're really trying to pull lots of information from that DNS server. Whether you're asking for one thing or many things, it's still active. It is not passive. So that would not be the right answer either. Running ping sweeps. Ping sweeps are very similar to port sweep, except the ping sweep is we're looking for just machines that are out and available on the network. Obviously, you're looking at traffic coming through. You got a packet analyzer. You've got an IPS or an IPS function within your firewall. You're going to see ping sweeps as well. And the last one, and this was the only one I could have really gone either way with. For those of you, the 6% of you that answered performing OS fingerprinting. That is the one that is OS fingerprinting for the most part, especially in functions like Nmap, is a very active way of identifying operating systems. But there are methods to be able to fingerprint operating systems that are very passive if you happen to have access to the network traffic that's going by. It's very unusual to see that, though. It's very time consuming. It's certainly something that works very well in the lab, but it has not really made its way into the real world, at least not actively. So performing OS fingerprinting, generally speaking, and for the most part, is an active method as well. The only option here is reading online forums. That's the only one it could have possibly been. And 54% of you chose that one. So in the chat room, people are talking back and forth about this particular question and whether it's active and whether it's passive or what it happens to be. What is it or what isn't it? Michael in the chat room is asking, is checking for outdated operating system software / patches passive or active? Well, first you would have to know what operating system they were using or what version of applications they were using. And the only way to obtain that information is to ask the device, is to query the device at the most basic way. So that is active as well. Once you have gathered that information, actually looking to see if they're running the latest things is obviously passive. But to get that information to start with, you have to perform some active lookup on that machine. So that's one that you would have to think about before you do it, because they're going to see you doing it. And once that happens, now it doesn't matter that the rest of it's passive. You already sounded the alarm. They already know that it's there. So same thing. Anytime you're asking anything of that machine and it's responding back to you, that's active. They know you're there. They have identified you. You cannot hide any longer. So that's why I think about these people are saying, what about these? If you run into that scenario, what is that going to be? If you are asking something of a machine, the machine is responding back to you, that's being logged somewhere. It's logged in a firewall. It's logged in the logs of a web server or a database server. It's all logged. Many of you, I see questions all the time. People say, I'm running this information through my corporate firewall. Can they see this? Yes. Yes, they can see that. Of course they can see that. Everything that goes through a corporate firewall, everything is logged. Every session is logged. Very, very few times, and I'm speaking as someone who was a systems engineer for a firewall company, there were very, very rare instances where someone would specifically not log a certain type of traffic. And that was usually based on something that was either not necessary to log, maybe that was some type of just overwhelming amount of traffic that was not interesting at all to them, or there were certain things that they did not want to log for privacy concerns. But for the most part, tons of logging on corporate firewalls. So anytime you hit that firewall, anytime traffic flows through that firewall, it's an active reconnaissance and it's going to be logged, I assure you. It's there. They may not see it because there's pages and pages, gigabytes and gigabytes of logs every day, but they can always go back and look at them. Everything is stored. So if you answered reading online forums as the passive reconnaissance, well done. That is the right answer. 54% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's go to the next question. I've talked enough for you. The next question asks, let me click so I can read it. It says, which of these security technologies can operate as a dissolvable agent? Which of these security technologies can operate as a dissolvable agent? And I've got 5 options for you again. Those options are proxy, SIEM, NAC, firewall, or mail gateway. These 5 security technologies, all 5 very valid security technologies, but only one can really act as a dissolvable agent. The answers again are proxy, SIEM, NAC, firewall, and mail gateway. And if you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answer. Please do not put an answer in the chat room. Please don't discuss the answer. Please stop Googling for the answer. That's the one you want to watch out for. You will not have Google during your exam. One of those things. We were talking over dinner last night, me and the family. The kids were talking about having people say you should Google this. Oh, thank you for providing that information. To help you along, here's the Google search. Somebody actually said, here's the Google search you can run to find more information on that. We're all very clear on how Google works at this point. You do not need to tell people that they can Google it. We're very, very aware. But maybe it makes people feel better. Well, here, let me help you. They're just trying to help. They're just trying to say, here's something that might help. This could help you. Yes, we know about that. And Googling active reconnaissance. Well done, Brian, in the chat room. We saw that in the firewall logs. It's active with the active reconnaissance. So if you know the answer for this dissolvable agent, make sure you lock that one in. We got a number of answers. I'm waiting for a certain number to hit. Usually when people know the answers, I'm going to take a sneak peek. See, I get to see the answers before you do and see how we're doing. Let's see what security technologies can operate as a dissolvable agent. Yes, people in chat room are going, what are you talking about? What is a dissolvable agent? I will tell you in a moment when we get there to those things. We will figure out all the details when we get to that point. So let's see how we did. We've got a number of you that answered. So we will go through this. Let's fix this on my side so you can see this properly. And let's see how we did. Let's click the How Do We Do button. There we go. Well, we're a little torn. We did not make that 50% for the things we were looking for. So that's one where we do want to go through and figure out which this is. So we got a tie for first. So 36% of you said proxy. 33% of you said NAC. 16% of you, a strong second place, said SIM. 9% said mail gateway and 7% said firewall. So mail gateway and firewall are single digits. We can throw those out, right? We don't think that's them. So it's really between these top three, a proxy, a SIM, and a NAC. Which one of these would be a dissolvable agent? So this is one where you do get an option for this, and you will have an option for this when you start implementing these types of technologies on your network, especially when you begin having people connecting to the network and you want to perform some type of health check. You want to perform some type of, you may see it referred to as a posture assessment. So this is one, it's very useful to have this capability, by the way. Whenever people are connecting to your network, wouldn't it be nice to know if someone was connecting and they had the latest version of the operating system patches? Wouldn't it be nice to know if they were running the latest version of antivirus and anti-malware signatures? That way, when they hit your network, you knew that their machine is as secure as you could hope for it to be at that particular point in time. And usually you can have many different criteria for this posture assessment. This is something that's usually done when these devices are first connecting to a network. They can also be done on an ongoing basis as they remain connected to your network. But these are, of course, a query that has to be made to this machine, and the machine has to respond back. Well, to be able to do that, the machine has to be able to, in some way, make sure that it can respond to you. You can't just ask things of these machines. You just can't ask anything and have a machine respond. The machine has to have an agent running on it, some type of service running on it that will respond to you when you ask it this query. There's different ways to implement these types of agents. One way is to permanently install an agent on a machine, and it's just always there. You know that if it's a machine that's used in your environment, you hand out laptops to everybody, you load on the laptop by default the permanent agent that's going to be used to provide that type of posture assessment, that type of check. Becomes very handy. But sometimes you have people connecting to your network who are third party. Maybe they're a partner of yours. You don't set up their laptops. You don't configure their systems. What you want to do is have an agent automatically load once they log in. It performs the check. And then once the check is over, it closes itself out and goes away forever. They never see it again. It's not loaded. It's not installed. It's nothing that's permanent on their machine. We call these dissolvable agents, just like you would be dissolving something in water. So they connect. The agent is loaded up during the connection process. It runs in their system during this connection process. The check is done of their operating system, the patches. You can see what type of anti-malware signatures they have. You can see if they've loaded certain types of software. You can perform a number of different checks. And once those checks are done and you validated them, the dissolvable agent disappears completely. So that becomes handy. There are some agents that are in some ways built into the operating system itself. We call these agentless NACs, network address. Network address translation. This is one of those times when you start getting into all of the different abbreviations of everything. Whenever you're doing any type of assessment, though, with any of these posture assessments, you're going to run into one of these scenarios. And you have to choose from them when you're going through them to figure out which one it's going to be. So whenever we start looking at what the different options are, we need to really try to figure out which one are we going to use. Some of these are better to use in different situations. Some of them are not. So make sure that you're going through and understanding exactly the situation you'll run into as well. And that's whenever I try to break these down, that's what you're going to see on here. Whenever you work through any type of posture assessment, it's always going to be done for some type of a device running network access control. So that's really the term we use, although this type of network access control can be done by a network access control device. It can also be done by firewalls. It can be done by VPN concentrators. That NAC functionality can be part of many different types of systems. So don't be thrown by the fact that it's performing a NAC process, but it's not a NAC device. In reality, it's a firewall, a VPN concentrator that is providing network type of control, network access control. So when you get into these questions and dealing with the view of the world, figuring out what these things are, make sure you understand the differences of all of these different technologies. Now let's step through each one of these. We know it's network access control is the dissolvable agent. Let's go through the rest of these that are here. The first one's proxy. 34% of you chose proxy. This was just as valid an answer as anything else. From a percentage perspective, it was tied for first, but it's not the right answer. Proxy is something that is going to act as the front end for the process that you are attempting. And usually we associate proxies with browsing and web front end, but there's many different type of proxies out there. But from a security perspective, let's deal only with maybe a browser proxy. To be able to do this, you are asking your proxy, I need to go to Google. And then Google will, or your proxy will then ask the request of Google. Google responds to your proxy. The proxy responds to you. It's a middleman. Proxy is by name. It's a middleman that's in there and figuring out those details. The proxy that you have available is something that's always there, though. It doesn't disappear. The proxy is something that you either are implementing or you're not. And if proxy is there, then it needs to be something that's always there. It will not dissolve. It will not disappear. It's always going to be there and always protecting you. So the proxy in this particular case, although it could be an agent, as some people are going, it's not really considered an agent. People don't think of a proxy as an agent. But the proxy itself is something that does not ever disappear. You would never categorize that as dissolvable. A SIEM, the Security and Information Event Manager, the SIEM is one that is very useful for gathering log files and other information from different devices on your network and consolidating all those log files into a central place. I mentioned that whenever you do anything on the network, it's logged. It's logged in multiple places. It could be logged on a switch, on a router, on a firewall, on an IPS, on a proxy. All of these things have logs, but they're all different logs, and it's nice to have them all consolidated into one place. That's what a SIEM is for. That Security and Information Event Manager is a great consolidation point, but it's not a dissolvable agent. In fact, that's not even close to being an agent. That's a full-blown service. It is a big service. It's an expensive service. You paid a lot of money for that SIEM. It's definitely not dissolvable. It's always there. And in fact, most of the time, there's a constant stream of log information coming from all of your different devices, from your firewalls, from your routers, from your file servers, from Windows, from Linux. It's streaming these log files into these SIEMs. They are extensive in the amount of data they receive, not a dissolvable agent. A firewall is another one of those. It's always there. It's always on. It's probably a central point between you and the outside world in many cases. So it's always there, and it's certainly not dissolvable. Mail gateway is another one of those. It's a service that's always there. It's always permanent. Your mail gateways don't go away either. Otherwise, you'd be getting some phone calls at this point. That's not a dissolvable agent. The only possible answer here is the NAC, is the network access control. Answer C, 36% of you chose NAC. I did not quite get to the 50%, but we got pretty close on that one. I try to get you to 50% so we can get through those. I am talking a lot today with the answers, but I'll make sure we get a couple more questions in. We're not gonna go cheap on you, and we're not gonna go short on you today. We'll get plenty of those in. I mentioned, by the way, very quickly, that everything that is in every single one of my videos is documented in my course notes. I take all of the text, all of the graphics that I create, all of the charts, all the tables, and I consolidate them into a single PDF. Now, of course, you can go through all of my videos, take your own notes. Please, I encourage that. But some of you don't have time to go through all the notes. It's difficult to sometimes get all the graphics put in here. So I've done all of that for you. And it's my Security Plus course notes that really does consolidate everything into one place. It's a way that you could get information on the cloud computing, on the dissolvable agents, on understanding more about the different authentication factors, on the cryptography. Everything that's in my videos is in these course notes. And I mean everything. Here's the course notes. I've got a copy right here. They're a PDF file. When you buy them, you download them. They're immediately available. And they're broken out by video. And they're in the same order as the CompT exam objectives. So if you wanted to find a particular thing, you can do that. You can even go to the list of things here. Let's go to, what was the last section? The last thing we looked at was section 2.1 for network access control. So you can go to 2.1 and go to network access control and click on it. And now we're at the network access control part right down here. And you can read all about the things we just talked about, including persistent, dissolvable, and agentless network access control devices. They are all there in this course notes, 94 pages long. These are some of the biggest course notes. These are the biggest course notes I've ever created. One single PDF, and it's all there. And it's only $20. Some of you have even said, I want to contribute back. You're putting the videos for free. I'd like to donate, but I don't take donations. I do want to give you something for your money, and hopefully this is something that can help you as you're doing those final study bits for your certification. This doesn't replace a book. It doesn't replace your videos. It doesn't replace any hands-on. It doesn't replace Q&A, but it's a great final study guide that you can use that summarizes everything all in one place. You can find out more about it at professormesser.com/security, professormesser.com/securitycn. Only the most important part of what I've been saying for the last couple of minutes. Every dollar of this goes back to keeping all of this running, by the way. So thank you for your support with this. Thank you for your ongoing support with this. Many of you have also gotten my A+ course notes, my Network Plus course notes. It all goes back to keeping the lights on. So thank you so much. Let's get more questions in, though, because I've been talking a lot today. Let's get another question in, another couple of questions in at least. We might go a little long today. Let the affiliates know we may be running long. Here's the question that you need to lock in to professormesser.com/QA. The question is, which of these cloud computing characteristics is most associated with capturing the state of a cloud service or reverting to a previous state or configuration? So let me ask that again of you. The question is, which of these cloud computing characteristics is most associated with capturing the state of a cloud service or reverting to a previous state or configuration? So your possible answers are automation, templates, orchestration, SaaS, or non-persistence. Those are the 5 different cloud computing characteristics you need to choose from. They are automation, templates, orchestration, SaaS, or non-persistence. Hopefully, those 5 things sound familiar. They are all real cloud computing characteristics. I didn't make any of these up. They're all things you need to know about. They're all cloud related in some way, but only one of them is most associated with capturing the state of a cloud service or reverting to a previous state or configuration. Hopefully, this sounds familiar to you. You can figure out the details of this one. Hopefully you've seen this. This is absolutely part of the exam objectives. I've mentioned the exam objectives a couple of times now, and I keep saying this over and over, is that should be the very first thing you read when you're studying for Security Plus. It should be the last thing you read. It's a great checklist at the end to see if you've really covered every single one of the topics you need to know on the exam. Not many, I don't think any certification providers really provide this level of detail except for CompTIA. For some reason, they give you everything you need to know. They just spell it out for you and tell you everything. And this is a great way to do it. If you want to find those, Google CompTIA exam objectives. See how I just did that? I told you don't tell people to Google things. That's what you should do, is Google it. I also have a link for you. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives. That'll take you over there as well. So that's the easiest way to find it. There's a big, long URL on the CompTIA website. You can hunt through the menus there, or just Google it. You'll find it. It's out there. Find all of those things. Let's see how you did with understanding the cloud computing characteristic that would be most associated with capturing the state of cloud service or reverting to a previous state or configuration. We've got a couple of options here. So 46% of us, close to 50%, said templates is the characteristic most associated with capturing the state of a cloud service or reverting to a previous state of or configuration. 20% said non-persistence. 15% said orchestration. 9% said automation. And then hardly anybody, 8% said SaaS. So this is where we really need to focus on capturing the state of the information that we're looking for. And the term that best describes this particular part of cloud computing is non-persistence. That was the one we were looking for. Now, how is non-persistence associated with capturing the state of a particular service or reverting back to a previous state or a previous configuration? Well, this is because this is a very common part of cloud computing. This is cloud computing, really. Is one of the beauties of cloud computing is that at any point in time, if you need a new service, you can build it. If you want to get rid of a service, you get rid of it. And it simply virtually goes away. You don't have to unplug a physical machine. In some environments, these instances of applications are constantly built and constantly torn down. It's an absolute commonality of this. But one of the things that you can do, especially if you may be using this instance later, is that you can grab a snapshot of that instance. Let's say that we're going to use this instance every month. We know every month we're going to need this specific configuration of this specific application. Let's capture that particular configuration and save it as a snapshot. And then we can shut down the whole instance. That's the whole beauty of the non-persistence part. And then later on, if we need that particular configuration, a month has gone by, well, it's time to do this again. We click a button and suddenly that instance is available again. And that service is exactly the way we left it because we have that snapshot there. Very useful to have that functionality. Now, not only can we capture an entire machine and its entire configuration that way, but of course, maybe it's just a specific config that's on that machine. Maybe we don't have to worry about the app so much, but the configuration is what we want to save. There are aspects of cloud computing and snapshot taking that allow us to capture just the configuration of the snapshot. And that way you can build the database server again or build the web server again, and then just slide over the configurations. And now magically, it now looks like the old configuration again. Very easy to make that happen. That's all part of the non-persistence characteristic that we have associated with cloud computing. And this is why when people talk to you about wanting to be able to learn, they call it programming, but it's not, it's scripting. They want you to learn some scripting. They want you to learn Python scripting. They want you to learn shell scripting. And the reason they want you to learn this scripting is because they want you to automate this process, to orchestrate, in the terms of cloud computing, these processes so that you don't even have to manually push a button to make all of these things happen. You wait for something to happen, maybe a certain time of day. We know this particular event happens on the 15th. So on the 14th, automatically using your scripts, your orchestration, it grabs the snapshot and starts up the configuration and makes those services available for 10 days. And then it breaks them down, stores them again with the latest snapshot. So there you go. Python is scripting. People will tell you Python's programming. Python's not programming. Python is scripting. They want to make you believe Python's programming. Programming's a completely different animal. That is a completely different, I guess technically speaking, you could call it programming. Sure. Python absolute programming. Yep. They will tell you that. And if you wanted to get down into the pedantics of what it is, yes, it's programming. But it's not really programming. It's not. Don't let them tell you that. Not true. Not the way it works. So those of you that did answer non-persistence, 20% of you answered E, non-persistent. That is absolutely correct. That's the right answer. Now, why wouldn't it be templates? Now, a template is a predefined configuration of a server, of a service, of an application. It's a predefined structure that's in place. And it's usually what you start with when you're building out a system. But we talked specifically about capturing the state of a cloud service or reverting back to a previous state or configuration. The template is the same every time. It's not saving any state. It's not saving your configuration. It's a blank slate, if anything. It's a starting point for everything. It's a good way to think about it. So if you start working through the details of how would I start with a blank slate, I need a template. Then once I work on the template and customize it and I have a configuration I want, let's take a snapshot so that later on I can shut this thing down and then bring it back later on if I need it through non-persistence. Orchestration, we already spoke earlier about what orchestration is and why that would not be the right answer. Automation, almost the same thing as orchestration, by the way. They're two very similar and almost interchangeable terms in the cloud computing world. And then you got SaaS. SaaS, software as a service, is a type of cloud computing. It's a type of offering of cloud computing, and it is not really done the same way. As it has nothing to do with capturing the state. It is the state. It is the application. It's not about capturing the state and having all of those things there. If you are watching this study group for continuing education credit, you can, of course, just tell CompTIA, yep, I watched this. That's perfectly reasonable. They will accept that. But I like to give you an email that tells you, yes, you absolutely watched it, and I can prove it. And here's how this works. You have to follow these instructions exactly, or you will not be able to earn this CEU from me, the CEU certification, if you will, from me. I will certify that you watched 1 hour of a webinar-based event, they call it. And this is something that you have to do by going to the top or the bottom of my website. There's a Contact Us link there. It's really contact me. It will send me a message. And in that Contact Us link, there's a form that comes up. That form will ask for your name, for your email address. Make sure the email address is right, because that's how I get this back to you. That's important. Some of you put in fake email addresses and then you don't get a response, and that's why. And I use your name in the certificate that I send you, in the digital certificate that I send you. So that's why that's important. And if you would be nice enough to tell me that this is the March 2019 Security Plus study group, that's useful. And in that message, put the words non-persistence. That is how I will know you at least watched up to this point with non-persistence. And we're able to get to this final view. Put that in there. Make sure I can read it. Don't hide the non-persistence somewhere in a paragraph of information. I will miss it. Trust me. I am not that attentive when it comes to these. So make sure it's very clear. And if you want to put any other message in there as well, you're more than welcome to. I'm reading through all of these. I may not be able to respond directly to things you put in there, but I do read through all of them. And if you do that and send it to me, I will send you an email back that has been digitally signed that says you get 1 hour of a webinar on this because you must have watched it up to this point. Way to hang in there. So there's your instructions for doing that. I know we're at the top of the hour. We're going to do another question because I talked too much this month. And the other question I have for you, this is a pretty good one. So let's do this one, and we'll see how we do with this next question. It's a long one. Are we ready? I think we are. The question asks, A system administrator has been asked to install an application on a server that runs in the background with no user intervention. The server also supports many other applications at the same time. Which type of account would commonly be associated with this application? So there's our scenario, not unlike a question you would get on your actual Security Plus exam. A security administrator has been asked to install an application on a server that runs in the background with no user intervention. The server also supports many other applications at the same time. Which type of account would commonly be associated with this application? Would it be privileged, generic, shared, service, or user? So there's your 5 options: privileged, generic, shared, service, user. Got 5 options there. This is one where we do want to know what this will be. You as a security professional will be asked to do this often. So this is a pretty important question, that you know what this happens to be. There's some challenges with this as well. This is kind of it can be a sticky wicket at times, dealing with these particular kind of questions and configuring them in a certain way. If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Please, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We're all going to figure this out as we go. Which one of these would it be? Privileged, generic, shared, service, or user for this particular scenario? And that's a pretty good scenario. The reason I brought up this specific scenario, in fact, is that this happened to me a lot. So this is one where we do want to figure it out and go through these details. People in the chat room also asking regarding that CEU that we were just talking about. If you go back and watch the replays, I absolutely give CEU credit for those as well. Now, for the Security Plus, the total number of CEUs you have to renew, I think, is 50 CEUs, 50, more than 49. It's 50. But they will only accept 10 webinar CEUs. And in fact, if you renew in other ways, like you renew taking the CertMaster CE, well, then you don't use CEUs at all. So you don't need me for that. But it's up to you. If you are collecting CEUs, and some people use these CEUs for other things as well. So that's another way to do it. So I'm more than happy to do the CEU. I've got an automated process on my side, so I can at least validate the information in there is correct. And then I hit a button, and it grabs your email, it parses it, it sticks it in a new email, and it sends it with the digital signature so that you can validate that with your PGP signature or your PGP checker and check my signature. My PGP certificate is on pretty much all the popular PGP databases out there. So you can do that with all those pieces. Make sure. And that's one where you do have to know exactly what you're doing to have all of those things there. So make sure that you go through. The CEU renewals occur in about every 3 years. You have to renew. So you will be collecting CEUs for that 3-year fee. I just did a video a couple months ago on how to renew your certification in just a few hours. So in that case, we aren't using CEUs. You may get down the last day and realize, wait, I have to renew today, or I lose this certification that I spent so much time on. What do? I only have a day left. Well, I'd give you an option in there, which you can do with a day left. None of it involves CEUs, though. So that's another thing to think about. Let's see how you did with this question. Let's go back. A system administrator has been asked to install an application on a server that runs in the background with no user intervention. The server also supports many other applications at the same time. Which type of account would commonly be associated with this application? How do we do? 69% of you said service, 19% of you said privileged. And at that point, it drops off to single digits in shared, generic, and user. But is that really the one we were looking for? Is, the large number, the majority of you said service. Well, is it a service account that we're really looking for? Well, it is. That was the key of this question, is that this particular application runs in the background. There's no user intervention. By definition, that's a service. On Windows, by definition, that's a service. On Linux, it's a daemon or a daemon, depending on how you would like to pronounce it. Either is actually correct. Thank you, Linux people, for your emails and calls. The server supporting other applications at the same time it's sort of important, but not really in the context of this question. It doesn't matter whether the server is supporting other applications at the same time or not. You're still going to create a service account to be able to do this. Now, we wouldn't use this to be able to make it happen. So the real challenge with this is knowing why we're choosing service over privileged account. And that's really the key with this one. Here's I'll give you a scenario, because this is the scenario that I ran into quite often. So I would be in a situation, I'll tell you a practical real world story about how this one came about. So I worked with a next generation firewall company. This next generation firewall has the ability to integrate to Active Directory. So as people are communicating through the firewall, it recognizes the name and or the groups that this person happens to be a member of. And you can set rights and permissions in the firewall that says if you are in the shipping and receiving group, you have certain rights and permissions through the firewall. This is great if a company is coordinated with their Active Directory and somebody leaves the organization, their Active Directory account's turned off, that person can no longer use that firewall. If somebody moves to a different department, they move to accounting, and now they have all the rights and permissions associated with someone in accounting because the Active Directory is updating with the group information. So that's very useful to have that there. To be able to make that link between firewall and Active Directory, there's no link between those two things. So you have to install a service on a computer that will be able to talk to Active Directory and then talk to the firewall. It's sort of a middleman between the two that can kind of collect Active Directory details and feed them off to the firewall so it can know who's in what group. A relatively straightforward process with tons of nuances. But that service has to run on that machine constantly. And the type of account that runs that service is a service account and not a privileged account. Privileged account is a term we would call for someone who's maybe an administrator on the network, and they log in with their administrator login. That's their privileged login. That's a user's account. And the reason we don't use a privileged account for that is that privileged account passwords can change. After 30 days, 15 days, whatever the configuration is in your environment, the password has to be changed. Oh, you have to change your password today. We've all done this. Okay, let me think of another long, complicated word, and I'll just increment the number that's at the end of it. Boom, now I've got a new password. As soon as I change my password, guess what happened to the service? It stopped working because it uses that as its authentication. That's why we don't use privileged accounts that are associated with a service. The service, of course, has a set of rights and permissions associated with it that people could consider to be privileged, but having privilege is not the same thing as being a privileged account. Privileged account's a capital P. It's a very specific kind of account. It's referring to a specific person, has a specific set of rights. It's not referring to a type of account that will be configured to authenticate a service, which is a service account. It's nice those two things match. Now, we still call it a service account if it's on Linux, even though we don't really call those services. We call them daemons. We don't really call it a daemon account. I guess we could. But that's why we separate those terms in that way. And that's why we very specifically call them out as services and how those particular services run. In fact, some of those services those accounts are less privileged. We sometimes will configure these service accounts to have fewer rights and permissions than users because these service accounts only have to do one particular thing. For example, a very common configuration for a service account is to configure a service account so that it cannot be logged in interactively, which means you can't go to username login on a keyboard, type in the user and account name, type in the user account password, and try to log in. It won't let you because you've configured that account to only be used as authentication for a service. So that's another good example of why a service account is handled a little bit differently than others. So the answer here is correct. Very well. Service account, 69% of you. That is the one that is right. People are asking, well, then how do you log in? How does the service authenticate? Within the service configuration of your operating system, you would say run this service as this username with this password in this non-interactive state. That's why. That's the difference. That's the nuance with all of these and all of those pieces. So that's why whenever I start looking at this and thinking about it, it's figuring out the details of all of those things. It's a little bit nuanced, isn't it? But it's an important nuance. And it's the ones you do have to know for your exam. Make sure you're very familiar with those. Well, I think our overtime session, we went over a little bit today, but that's okay. We got a lot done in the list of the things that we had to do today. As a final reminder to you, make sure that you get the exam objectives. They are so important for the things that you're going to be doing. You can find them on the Google. You can find them on my site. Go to CompTIA's site. They are there as well. Yes, we have an after show today, so stick around. We're not done. I'm not leaving yet. I'm still here. But the Q&A part, we've gotten through an hour of Q&A. We've done those pieces, but we'll do more Q&A next month. Come on back. We've got one of these every month that we do. April the 17th will be the next Security Plus study group. Of course, on the 2nd and 4th are my 2 A+ study groups. On the 10th is my Network Plus study group, and on the 17th is my Security Plus. If you want to find when the next live event is, just come to my website, click the calendar link, or go directly to professormesser.com/calendar. For all of those, it's plenty there you can choose from. And of course, if you're watching this on the replay and you're well after April, all the updates will be there on the calendar link. I was looking through some of these earlier. There were some questions that came up about a study group I did in 2012. So I had to go back, like 2012. We were doing study groups back then. So if you're watching the ones from 2012 and you're wondering when's the next live event, it's on professormesser.com/calendar. Plenty of those there to be able to make that happen. So that's the real details of figuring out all of those pieces. Make sure you do that and figure all of those out. That's the one to keep track of. By the way, of course, you can always go to my website and look at the course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. Don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube. By the way, I will tell you, for those of you that have done this, you've subscribed on YouTube. You don't even have to click the bell if you don't want to. But if you want to see when I put new videos out, you're more than welcome to do that. But it's great because I have someone at YouTube I can talk with, someone at YouTube that I do talk with, and they talk to me. So they take what we do here very seriously. And it's great to see. We would not be able to do that without your support. Thank you so much for subscribing on YouTube. We also do daily pop quizzes for A+, weekly pop quiz for Network Plus, and assorted things that I sometimes throw out on Twitter. I'm doing more on Instagram, or I'm trying to. You're starting to now see on Instagram me trying to clean up my studio. Not sure that's something you want to see, but you can always go to professormesser.com/Instagram to see that. Thanks for being here for this first hour in the Q&A and participating, and your questions in the chat room. Stick around for the next hour. I'll be taking just any question you'd like, almost any question you'd like from the chat room or calling in. I'll show you to do that in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. It's time for the after show, everybody. Now I have to get the after show stuff ready. So this is the part where you have to wait while I turn things on and configure a few things. For the next however long it is, I'll be sitting here and I'll answer questions from the chat room. You can ask questions about anything. It doesn't have to be Security Plus. It doesn't have to be the industry in general. It can be. You can make this whatever you'd like. But I'll answer questions about all of that. Let me first get the phone lines up and running so that I can call in and so that you can call in, which are really the most important part of this, is making that happen. Otherwise, it'd be kind of boring for all of us. So let me host a show, start the show. Okay, then you're going to call into the show, but before you call into the show, I have to call into the show. So I understand this is not compelling viewing. I'm with you on that, but it's a necessary evil, and we'll get to it in just a moment. There we go. So I need to type in something on my side and make this happen, and I'll type that in, and it says, enter your six. We will do that and type in these things, and once I do that, it should say, welcome. There we go. That's what I was hoping for. It's a nice welcome. Hi, thank you for being here. So with that in mind, if you would like to call in on the telephone, You can call in by using a toll-free number. Doesn't cost you anything. Area code 855-785-RJ45. If you would like to call in for free on Skype from anywhere in the world, you put a +1 in front of that on Skype. No Skype minutes needed because it's a toll-free number. I pay for the minutes. So put a +1, 855-785-7545. The number's on the screen there. You can call in if you'd like to. I'll also be taking questions from the chat room. So you can go to professormesser.com/live. I'll take questions from there as well. So that's plenty of places you can go to have this, to have those details on there. So one of the things that people are talking about in the chat room, one of the questions that have come in are about logs and finding log files. Now, I have videos. This is part of the Security Plus exam objectives, of course, is you becoming familiar with looking through antivirus logs, firewall logs, intrusion prevention logs. The challenge, though, with that, and I have this in my video, I give you a list of a log and I show you some of the logs. And in previous study groups, we've examined log files and tried to parse out what the log file was showing. But logs they're a lot of information. It's a lot to kind of figure out on the screen at one time. In some environments, it can be a bit confusing. It's just a bunch of text. But in a lot of firewalls and intrusion prevention and routers, they're very often very common terms that you will see across those. So if you can read the firewall log in one firewall, then you can read the firewall log that's in a lot of other firewalls as well. One of the things that I would recommend you do is you can Google this. Here's what you want to Google. So this is me completely messing up what I said earlier about don't tell people to Google things. But I'm going to give you some very specific tips on how to find wide open firewalls on the internet that will allow you to look through their logs. Why would someone do this? In many cases, the manufacturers of the firewalls put them out for demonstration purposes, and they encourage you to log into these firewalls. They are out there, and in fact, behind the scenes, they are running demo data. It's fake data. It's not real data, but it looks like real data, which is the important part. So what you want to do is find a live demo or an open demo of a firewall. They are out there. And that's all you have to Google is live demo firewall. I think that's pretty much what I use in a number of cases to find these. If you do that, you may have to hunt through a number of these to get to the one you're looking for. But a number of companies will make these available. And you, of course, have to log in. It usually gives you a login, demo. You log in as the demonstration. And at that point, you kind of have to feel your way around the user interface, but it's usually relatively straightforward. There's probably a log link right on there that takes you to the logs. And then you just look at a raw breakdown of these logs and start parsing them out. What is this telling me? And it's a great way to get more familiar, or really not more familiar. It's relatively obvious, but to get less scared of the unknown. The unknown, it frightens me. Whenever I get into technology, I know nothing about it. I'm so worried that I'm not going to understand it. And then I get into it and look and I go, oh, that's it? That's a log file? Oh, okay. I got it. So it's that fear of the unknown you have to get through. But if you can find a live demo of an IPS, a live demo of a firewall, they are out there. And it's a great way to not only look at a log file, but you're looking at a real live enterprise firewall that is installed and running in a number of different companies. And if somebody says, have you ever worked with the interface that's on any of these firewalls? Oh yeah, I was doing some work on a live demo that was online. I stepped through and looked at the logs. I look at the access list, look at the security policies. How are the security policies laid out? How does that match the log files? The log file will probably tell you if a particular thing in the log, what rule it matches. So you can now go back to the rules and see the rule that was matched. So there are things you can do with that to make that happen. So you definitely want to go through and look at those and try to figure out those details. It is something that you can do to make all of these things more clear in your mind. I think it's a fun way to do it too. It's kind of, you're learning something and kind of figuring out on your own. It's almost like a little quest. You're on your way to figuring out those things, but you have to find it yourself. And I would give you direct links here, but I just don't think that's appropriate to give you a direct link to these demo firewalls. There's a gray area there. These demo firewalls are there for business purpose for these companies. I don't want to overwhelm any of them. None of them are sponsoring us. None of them want us probably there. Some of them require that you have to register. Some don't require registration at all. So I want to be careful about overwhelming somebody with this functionality, but they are out and available on the internet for a reason. So it's a plus and minus to have all of those there. Let's go to the calls. There's some more questions that have come in the chat about cryptography and other things. But in the meantime, let's quickly go to caller 347 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, I hear me. Are you there, caller? Did it make a beeping noise when I picked up the phone to alert you that I was going to come on the line and you could jump right in and say, hi, my name is... No, it's
Hello, my name is Jonathan Chakra.
There he is. Yes, we got you, John. Thank you. Thank you for calling in. What can we do for you today?
Yeah, so I've been looking over the list of the acronyms that CompTIA provides, and some of them, there's some that are like BYOD, bring your own device. Are those things that you have to know? Like on the test, will they say BYOD as opposed to bring your own device, or...
CompTIA is very, very interesting about how they use this list. For people that are not familiar with this list, I'm going to bring it up. It's at the end of the CompTIA exam objectives that I went on and on about earlier. So I'm going to bring up my SY501 exam objectives. I think I got the old ones here that are in the old format, but it should at least give us... No, I've got the new format here, and I'm going to skip ahead to the ones that are at the end. Maybe make this 2 pages because it's so big on my screen here. Let's view this in 2-page format. And then let's skip all the way. You can see all the colors I did as I was making the videos. Each one of those means something. But in the back is an entire list of Security Plus acronyms. And it's extensive. Look how there's like 4 pages of these things. They are huge. And almost all of them are legitimate. I will tell you that some of these acronyms are first rarely, if ever, used in the security industry. Other acronyms that are in the back of these things, and I can't find one I should look through these and really point them out. Some of them are just wrong. Like there's not an acronym that means this thing. I almost think they put it in here like map makers will put in a fake town to see if somebody else makes a map with the fake town and they know they got copied. I wonder if sometimes the CompTIA is hiding one of these things in here so that you could tell somebody's stealing their stuff. But to answer your question, by the way, for the most part, it helps to know what the acronym is, but CompTIA is never going to ask you a question that says, what does ERP mean? Oh, ERP means Enterprise Resource Planning. They're never going to ask you this. That is never going to happen. Instead, it will be more like the questions I asked today, which ask you a big scenario, and then it says, is it SaaS, IaaS, PA? So you have to know what those things are, but more importantly, you have to know not just what they stand for, which quite honestly is kind of secondary. You have to know what they mean. You have to know if they say SaaS, if they say SaaS, what is SaaS? Not is it software as a service? What is that? How does SaaS apply to security and what I'm doing with this? So it's more of a broader term. If I was going to focus on the exam objectives, focus on the core of the objectives at the beginning: domain 1, domain 2, domain 3, domain 4, domain 5, and domain 6. That should be your primary focus. And by going through all of that, you're pretty much going to be familiar with these acronyms once you're done with that. I would not focus on flashcarding yourself with knowing what those abbreviations mean. That's more of a waste of time. You'd be better off looking at the abbreviation and going, ECB, what does that mean in the bigger picture of security? If you can answer those questions, then those are useful to you and you should use them that way. But most of the time, they're going to be a reference to you understanding a bigger scope of how that fits with security.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
This is one where whenever I start breaking out, what do you need to know for the exam? It really is all in the exam objectives. I think we got a good view of that just then, didn't we? These are my exam objectives. Each one of these colors means something. I don't know why half the pages are not colored. They were all colored in the one I was using. So when I make my video, Anything that's green was in the old version. Anything that's yellow is in the new version. You can see half of this course is new. And anything that's purple was kind of covered in the old one, but it needs a lot more in the new one. So that was my coloring scheme for those of you curious about why that looks so weird when I was bringing it up on the screen. That's why, because I'm weird that way. Let's go to the 240 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Master. This is Ray calling from Maryland.
Ray from Maryland. Welcome, sir. What can we do for you?
So I've taken the SY 401 like 3 times, and I'm getting closer. I'm in the 695 area.
Okay.
So I took the 501 one time, and I'm at the 619.
Yeah, it went down.
But yeah, quite a bit.
Wrong direction.
But what I noticed, yeah. So I'm trying to figure out where I need to work on. And I think the acronyms, like you were just talking about the previous caller, the acronyms they're putting the acronyms definition in the sentences. And for some reason, an acronym you never heard of pops up on the test.
Right. And that will happen because you do have situations where, and they even say at the beginning of the exam objectives, we put a lot of stuff in here, but we could ask you other things too. And they certainly can. And there are a number of acronyms I use in my course that are not listed in the set of acronyms in the back of the exam objectives. Most of them are there, but not really. Now, the fact that you're seeing a difference in the grading from your 501 versus the 401, I would say is almost expected to be that way. The 501 exam, and I should bring up my statistics, but over 50% of the 501 exam is new content from the 401. That's how dramatic the differences are between those two. So if you were very familiar with the 401 and then suddenly you take the 501, you realize I'm not familiar with this at all, that's probably because it's actually bigger than that. The number I have, 61% of the exam objectives on the 501 exam are new from the 401. That's an enormous number, 61%. So if you studied and you knew everything on the 401, you probably would not do very well in the 501 either. So the fact that it went down a little bit, don't worry about it. That's completely expected in the 501 exam. You're going to have to shift gears. You're going to have to find other 501 content and maybe even approach the content in a different way. How many different textbooks are you using, Ray?
I'm using the CompTIA book. I'm using all of your YouTube studies. I'm in your Security Plus 501 class prep group. I've answered the questions that we just did a little while ago correctly. I'm using everything I can find. Matter of fact, I'm signing up for a class as of next week.
Okay.
Because I think that's gonna be a big help to me because I think I'm skipping over something that I can't quite put my finger on it.
Everybody learns differently. Some people like to read a book in a dark room and they get it. Some people need hands-on and they get it. Some people watch videos and they get it. Some people need a combination of those. So you have to figure out the one that works best for you. The reason I specifically asked about a textbook is that when I was studying for my A+ back in the day, I went through all the A+ material and I went through an entire book. I thought, well, that's pretty good. I think I got most of this. And then I happened to have a second textbook from a different author, from a different publisher. And I read that and I thought, that is completely different than what I just read. I really get it now. This book was it was more for me. It was written more for me than that first book was. Or the situation was that I kind of got the overview in the first book, and then by reading it again in a different way, it really solidified the things that I was missing. I guess there's two things that could have happened there. So that's why I mentioned if you have a way to get your hands on another Security Plus book, maybe that's the thing that turns your head around and goes, oh, okay, now I understand more about what they meant in that first book that now is written in the second book. That might be the way that works for you. It sounds like you've got the right resources, though. You've got a good book. You've got videos. If you got plenty of Q&A. Make sure you got plenty of good Q&A. And the last thing is hands-on, which is not quite as easy for Security Plus. But one of the things I just mentioned was finding a live firewall on the internet to look at log files. That's hands-on. So that may be something good to look at as well, is go out to the internet and touch a firewall. Some people like to install a firewall on their local network. pfSense, for example, a very common open source firewall. There are live CDs and virtual machines available to download so that you can simply click a button and pfSense is now running on your computer, and you connect to it with a browser and start looking at the details of that firewall. And a lot of the things we talk about IPsec tunnels is in that firewall. The things about log files, it's in that firewall. The things about understanding a security policy, a set of ACLs on a firewall, that's obviously in a firewall. So there's things you can also do to kind of extend what you're reading and what you're seeing in the videos as well. Make sure you take advantage of those as well.
Okay. So real quick, and thank you very much. And all these things you're talking about in regards to the firewalls and everything, I've installed them.
Okay.
That's the crappy part about it. I've installed these things. I've configured them. I've updated the iOS. I've done all that. Just that when I get to the terms on the test, it kind of throw me for a loop.
Security has its own nomenclature. It has its own style of communication. It has its own way of talking. This may be an opportunity to go out and start looking at some of these companies that make these products. The product managers make YouTube videos. The technical marketing managers make YouTube videos. I know I used to work at Palo Alto Networks. There are tons of Palo Alto Networks, these whiteboard things they do. They're kind of a light board that they do online, where they're talking to you in the same language of security that if you were not in the security world, it's a completely different language. And so you start to become more familiar with what they're talking about when they describe building out the cloud-based malware detection and understanding more about IPsec tunnels and trying to detail more about the integration of IPS and firewalls. Some of those videos might help you get more familiar with the style of language that's also used on the Security Plus exam, because I've seen the questions on Security Plus, and you're right. It's a different language. It's not English. It looks like it's English. It's very familiar to someone who may have spoken English before, but there's a different language going on there, and you do have to become a little more familiar with it.
Copy that. Okay. Thank you, sir. I'm enjoying your videos and your class, and you excellent information all the way around prior to my phone call. But thank you. This is great as well. Thank you.
Ray, keep doing what you're doing. Keep working on these things. You will get this exam passed, and it will open up a whole world of things for you. I just know it.
Great. If I could just get past the cost of the test, I'd be all right.
that is going to be another challenge you're going to have to figure out, Ray. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that's a tough one. To go through that, you got to pay that every time for those. I do commiserate with Ray on that one for sure. The chat room, how expensive is it to retake the tests? It can be expensive. You can buy bundles from CompTIA where they will give you a retake that costs more than it's obviously costs more than just buying one exam, but less than buying two. You kind of have to hope for a failure to take advantage of it, though. Not sure that's exactly the best way to go about doing it. Otherwise, you're paying for it again. You're paying the same price again for the retake. There's no discount for the retake for that. However, there is a discount, one of the most significant discounts from CompTIA before we go to the calls. I know callers, you've been holding a while. I thank you. Just very quickly is the CompTIA Academic Marketplace. CompTIA Academic Marketplace. Those are your Google terms. Since I'm going to stick with this now. I'm locked in. The irony of me now telling you to Google everything. CompTIA Academic Marketplace. If you are a student in academia, there may be discounts available to you on the CompTIA Academic Marketplace. There's a number of criteria you have to be. You have to be a student, and they'll tell you all about that. It's not about what email address you have. It's never been about what email address you have. People think that if you have a certain email address, you get a discount. No. It's always been about, are you a student? Now they're just confirming that you are a student. And that's the way you do it. Go to the CompTIA Academic Marketplace. About a 50% discount if you're a student. 50, more than 49, less than 51. About a 50% discount. So very useful to have that there. 602 area code. Thank you for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Doctor or Professor Messer. My name is Kelly, and I was hoping you had mentioned during the Q&A session about an expedited process to gaining enough CEUs for both your Security Plus and your Network Plus.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could go over that again.
It wasn't CEUs. It was an option. It was alternative to a CEU is what it is. And it is what CompTIA calls their Cert Master CE, Cert Master Continuing Education, what that stands for. What they've done is that we'll talk specifically about Security Plus, but the same scenario works for pretty much everything. If you took and earned your Security Plus certification by taking and passing the SY0 401 exam, that's the one just before this. If you took the 401 exam or a previous version of Security Plus to earn your Security Plus certification, you can take their Cert Master CE program, which is effectively a computer-based training that takes you through all the different domains. It asks you questions. You have to get all the questions right. If you don't get the questions right, you have to go through it again, ask the questions again until you get it right, and then you go to the next topic. If you go through all those topics, which CompTIA says takes you about 4 to 6 hours to go through the entire course, and of course you can stop and come back if you want. It takes 4 to 6 hours to go through it. Many people have told me they finished it faster. Once you do that, you're recertified for 3 years. That's it. That's, wow. I know. That's awesome. I think everybody should be doing this. It's the way to go for recertification. Someone came to my website about a month ago and said, I have to get certified this week. Where can I find enough CEUs? And I said, well, have you tried just Cert Master CE? And they said, well, And I said, well, it's right there on the CompTIA website, Cert Master CE. And they went away. They came back the next day and said, that's it. I'm done. I'm recertified for 3 years. And that's all they had to do. And they kind of prompted me to make a video that is how to recertify, how to get your CompTIA certification recertified in just a few hours. If you type in CompTIA just a few hours, that's the first video that comes up, which is how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus in just a few hours. And I do in that video talk about gathering CEUs. I talk about taking a CompTIA exam, the next higher exam. I talk about taking a third-party exam. And I talk about the advantages and disadvantages for all of those, which the biggest disadvantage, of course, is time. If you're in your last week before your certification expires, that's a big disadvantage. But the Cert Master CE, if you happen to fit all of the right criteria, you can be recertified in a day. And the cost isn't much more than if you paid the CEU certification fees. So it's a win-win in my world. That would save me an amazing amount of time. So that's something to consider. And it may work for you. You may fit the criteria, you may not, but you can go out to the CompTIA website and have a look.
I thank you so much for your time. And I have to say, Professor Messer, to all of us out here in the IT community who view you as a valuable resource, you are the pinnacle. In my book, you're a rock star. So I thank you.
I appreciate it. You're the one doing the hard work, Kelly. So best of luck, and let us know how that recertification goes.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. That's a little tidbit not a lot of people know about yet, I think. How's that video doing, by the way? It's doing very well. So people have found it like, oh, this is a great idea. I got a lot of views on that one. I didn't really do it for the views. I did it because I don't think people heard about it. And then when you tell somebody, well, you can just get recertified just a few hours. And they go, I could? Yes, you could. You might. It doesn't apply to everyone, but you might be able to do that. So that could be an option for you. Let's go back to the calls. 224 area code. Hello, caller. Thanks for being there. Thanks for being you. What's your name? Where are you calling from? I hear me on the stream. So you may want to turn the stream down, listen into the phone. There. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm calling from Chicago.
Welcome, Jonathan. What can we do for you?
Yeah. Well, I had a few questions about the cloud computing terms and stuff like that. Like, what would be like? How, first of all, I know there's like cloud computing and all that stuff, but how is it? How I mean, how prevalent is it in security? Like
It's
the cloud stuff. I know you got like networking and you're able to do a lot of networking devices and set them up and be able to set up a lot of security in that department. But like, yeah, how prevalent is cloud computing?
it's everywhere. It is every organization you walk into will have some level of cloud computing that is going on. Whether it is cloud computing, because many people think of cloud computing as I'm using Microsoft Azure, I'm using Rackspace's cloud, I'm using Amazon Web Services. Many people think of cloud computing as I'm using a third party service to be able to provide this particular application or this particular instance of a service that's out in this cloud. It doesn't have to be that way, though. Many organizations have a private cloud. They bought all their own hardware to build this cloud that they're now using as if it was a third-party cloud. They're using those advantages that you get from cloud computing, which is we talked earlier about being able to take the state of a service and it goes away and you can bring it back anytime you want. You can build out entire fields of services, database servers, web servers, third-party services. You can click a button and instantly create these services on your network. And the same way, you can instantly create a virtual switch on your network. You can instantly create a virtual firewall on your network. And here's where we start getting into the security of this. The cloud could effectively be one big machine with tons of storage. It could really be one big computer just in the middle of the room. You can think of it that way. Very often it's many different computers all working together and looking like one big computer. But functionally in your brain, think of it as one big box with a bunch of storage inside of it and a bunch of memory. And we're simply carving out sections of that box to be able to make this cloud computing thing happen. It is that functionality is incredibly useful. We used to, before cloud computing, if you wanted to build out a new application, you got a purchase request and you bought new boxes. They ship you the boxes. That would take a couple of weeks. They ship you boxes. You put the boxes in the rack. You power them up. You make sure they have an operating system. You install the software you need. All right, that's one box. Now we need another one. Order another one. It comes, it's very time consuming and very expensive. But with cloud computing, we say, well, we need an instance of an application running. Oh, okay, hold on. Click, 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 click. All right, I just put a web server online with our default configuration and our default security settings, and I just put a database next to it that you can use to store the data. And I just click, 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 just build a firewall out of this. And in that firewall, it has all the default firewall rules that allows that particular web service to run and nothing else. I just did that in 10 seconds. What else do you need? So there's your value. There's the amazing part of cloud computing is now you're focusing more on how do I make this service available to the world rather than how long is it going to take to get these boxes in. That's one of the most significant advantages. The second one at that point is now security becomes a huge issue. If now everything that happens is inside of a box, how do you secure that? How do you keep all of those components separate? How do you keep them secure? How do you keep people from the outside from accessing them? How do you keep somebody from gaining access to one service inside the box and jumping around to other services that are inside the box? That becomes pretty important. So that's where you get into virtual firewalls, virtual IPSs, virtual networking, different VLANs within the virtual switches. There's an entire world of that. I mentioned that also in my videos. It's brought up in the Security Plus exam objectives, but I only give you a cursory overview. If you really want to get in detailed, very extensive overview of that, go out to the Palo Alto Networks of the world and look at their write-up on cloud-based firewalls. And you can even bring one up right now. You can hit Amazon right now, tell Amazon to build out a Palo Alto Networks firewall, and boom, you've got one in the cloud. That's how easy it is. They talk more about it in their breakdown that goes well beyond the scope of the Security Plus exam, but that's effectively the concept you need to understand for the Security Plus exam objectives.
Mhm. So, another question is like how, if you had a company and you wanted to do like only cloud computing, can't you just just only do cloud computing for everything? Like, oh, I'm gonna have this successful business. I'm gonna make lots and lots of money, and this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna be very successful. Can you be just successful by just doing cloud computing?
I don't know why not. Well, let me give you an example. If you are on my website right now and you are in my live chat and you have been to any of my web pages and you have purchased my course notes and you've downloaded my course notes and you're watching this live stream and doing anything else on my site, it's all done in the cloud. So that's a very good example of cloud computing. I don't have any of my own servers anywhere. If I want to build out a new server, and this has happened, is that my servers have gotten very busy. I click a button, a new instance of a server is built, and now I've got another service running for my website, and I can sort of spread that load over those. All I do is in the cloud. I have servers and services running in a Rackspace cloud. A lot of the files that you download from me when you buy course notes, they're coming from the Amazon Cloud Services in their S3 service, which is their storage service. There's a lot of different cloud offerings and how they implement them. I'm probably a very good example of taking advantage of that so that I can focus on making more videos. I can focus on doing more live streams, and I don't have to focus on where am I going to get another box to load another web server on. I don't even think about it. If I need another web server, I click a button. I have a new web server.
Yeah. Okay. And then one more, and then that's it. Just you say like something you are, like the multi-factor authentication types, so it's like something you are,
Yep.
somewhere you are, all those other ones. Like, is there like a good resource online with like questions related, like, oh, it's like asking you what type of multi-factor authentication type this is, and so like that resource link. I don't know.
Well, we did 6 of them today. So you got good 6 options of things you run through. I run through examples of all of those in that video I mentioned during that question. Some of the companies that provide multi-factor authentication don't go into that level of scope. They're really focused more on what their product does. So it's kind of hard to find those. There probably is some more Q&A on multi-factor within my Security Plus Q&A that's on my website, which is at professormesser.com/popquiz. But I don't know for sure if those are there. But I do give you some pretty good examples, multiple examples for each one of those in my video that kind of covers probably 90% of the cases.
Right. And I can always look back on the other videos and just be able to answer those.
Yeah, and think anytime you're authenticating, anytime somebody asks you to log in or prove that you are you, think to yourself, what authentication factor is this? You may only be doing one authentication factor. It may not be multi-factor authentication. You may be putting in a username and password. Well, that factor is something you know. Okay, well, I remember that. Now you go and you write a check. What factor is that? You go log into the ATM. What factor is that? You go to your bank and open an account. They will probably ask you for something to prove that you are you. What factor is that? So you can almost do this yourself without, in a normal day, how many times you authenticate and what authentication factor was it?
Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Professor. I used your course notes for A+ and everything. I passed my A+ like a while ago,
Nice.
and I'm just going for my Security Plus now. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Congratulations on your A+. Best of luck with Security Plus. Let us know how it goes, Jonathan.
All right.
That's one you sort of get into this mode. Whenever I'm putting together the Security Plus course, really these days security is in everything. So I'm finishing up an A+ course now and working on the next A+ course, and it's got a ton of cloud in it. It's got tons of security in it. I'm almost repeating myself in these courses because so much of it is broad and talks about security in the same way. It's almost like we're spreading those Security Plus course exam objectives, and they're bleeding into Network Plus and A+ more and more every time there's an update. From the chat room, folks are asking, am I planning on doing any courses or videos covering CISA or CASP? These are the higher level certifications for the that are just above Security Plus. So the cybersecurity system administrator, that's the CISA, and the advanced security practitioner, which is the CompTIA advanced security practitioner, which is CASP. I'm not currently planning any videos or courses for those two. There's been some thought of creating course notes for them, even though there's not a course, but creating course notes for them. So there's been some thought along those lines, but currently no current plans. Part of the reason for that is that those particular certifications are very focused. They are very specific to a certain group of people. And it usually takes plus or minus about 6 months to do a course, from the very beginning to the very end till it's done, which includes videos and course notes and Q&A. It covers about 6 months of my life for one course. So whenever I decide to do a course, I want to be sure it's a course that will be able to help as many people as possible. And right now, as we're speaking here in March of 2019, CISA and CASP aren't quite at the level I'm hoping to see. They're getting more popular. They are becoming a little more industry normal. People are starting to recognize them and going, oh yeah, it'd be good if you had CISA. It'd be good if you had CASP. But they're still very niche. So they haven't quite gotten the broad appeal I would like to see to be able to make the business decision. That's the idea that I would make a course on that. Could there be some content that I create regarding those? There could be. Maybe I make some Q&A, maybe some sample tests for those, maybe a set of course notes for those. You know, those are the deal. I'm not saying that those aren't good courses. I think they are. I'm not saying don't get those certifications, because those are good certifications to get if you're looking to get a job in those particular areas where employers want that content. I'm saying that it's such a small niche of security that it doesn't quite fit my business model. So that's my approach to it. It's right in my wheelhouse. I'm a IT security professional. I did security, next generation firewalls for years. So it makes sense. I talked to tons of security people in my career. Why wouldn't I do something relating to that level of security? Because it's all about the viewers I could get watching and using that content. At the end of the day, these lights need to stay on. And so I have to make this balancing act like, well, that's what I want to do. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd play Xbox and have a Twitch channel all day. Yeah, but family wants food and they want clothing and they want shelter. So there's this balancing act of, all right, I've given up my dream of a Twitch channel and we're focusing on this. I love doing this. So it's a good, those are two good things to choose from. I like this a lot and I'm glad it worked out. Twitch might be nicer. No, Twitch should be, maybe, why don't I do both? I don't know why not. I've got time at night. I could carve this out instead of working this half day, I call it, which is 8 to 8. Why not at night turn on Twitch? We could do that. I don't know that anyone would be interested in seeing it. That's why. So instead, I support other Twitch creators. I watch them and I vicariously live through their success. That's my goal, is to help them out with what they're doing. That works for me. And so far that's worked out just fine. Nobody wants to see me in my pajamas on my couch playing Twitch. Nobody wants to see me live doing that, much less on Twitch. Yeah, what if I'm on Twitch and we're doing Q&A at the same time? Nobody would watch that either. See how this works? It's this combination of different things we have to kind of combine together. I have tried different iterations of this. I've tried podcasts. I've tried different types of products. I've tried selling products not online, but commercially. I've written textbooks. You know, I've tried a lot of different things to find the thing that I am most comfortable with, that I like the most. And this is the thing I like the most, is making the video courses, making the course notes, doing these types of live streams. that seems to be working okay for us. We're doing good with that model, and we'll just keep doing that. I always tweak things, always try different things. There's always a change to exactly what we're doing. You'll always see updates and minor adjustments. And sometimes we make major adjustments and we just go right into the wall. Because if I'm going to go, I go hard. And if it doesn't work, I hit the wall really hard. And then we just get up and do something else. That's the only way to do it on the internet, is you have to go really, really fast and really, really hard. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Just keep getting up and figuring out what part of that thing just worked and which part didn't, and do the part that worked and stop doing the part that didn't work so much. That's my business talk for today. That was it. That's my entrepreneurial breakdown of how business works on the internet. Not too far off the mark, quite honestly. Pretty right there as far as content. Let's go back and look at questions from the chat room. There were a couple of others that came through. Some of the other folks were asking about other types of certifications. I don't necessarily know what's next. People always ask, what's the next thing you're doing? What's the next thing you're doing? What's the next thing you're doing? Right now, I'm in the middle of finishing A+. A+ certification was updated in January. So there's a brand new A+ course available, almost done, the 1001. The 1002 content will be shot shortly and edited, and that will be done. And then we'll be through the latest set of videos. And so at that point, I got to figure out, what do we do next? Is it A+ Q&A? Is it I've got a good bit of Security Plus Q&A that I'm working on. So there's another book in there of Q&A, kind of sample test book. Trying to work on that and get that one done. That may be the next thing we do, is Security Plus sample exams that are written in the same style and voice of the actual exam, but it's not the actual exam questions. It's questions that I write that are completely original, but they have the same cadence and style and terminology, way of asking the questions as the actual exams. Because some people have been asking for, and we mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned that these exam questions are crazy in the way they ask these questions. Well, what if you got used to that already and then it wasn't so abrupt when you ran into it on the exam? That's hard to do, but I think we've got a good mix of those ready to go. That will probably be the next thing we do. Am I planning on Cisco material? Well, right now I have an ICND 1 course notes. I'd love to do some ICND 2 course notes. That might be a good logical next step. That's another thing that's on my list. I have a big list of things, but there's just me writing content. So that's the challenge, is where do I fit it in the list? And the list is I'm always moving things around. I'm like an air traffic controller where they're always moving the flights around into a different order. I'm always doing that, sometimes day to day. So I apologize that I don't have a formal direction or a time frame that I can show you of what's happening next, because I'm just not going to do that to myself. The only thing that I do is pick a product, a service, a topic, something I think people can use, and we start doing it. But I don't have any personal deadlines associated with those. I make them the highest quality I can, and when they are finished, that's when they are available. I do not create arbitrary deadlines. I do it as fast as I can. It's not like I'm not doing it quickly, but that's where we're getting there. So people in the chat room go, where can I get the Q&A for Security Plus? Where's the sample test? It doesn't exist yet. It's halfway written. It's not even edited completely yet. I'm working on it, but that's months down the line for those. Do I still consult with companies for security? I've never consulted with companies for security. Or am I full-time working on materials and teaching? Yes, this is a full-time thing. We've been full-time here about 4 years. My previous position was as a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks for about the last 7 years before doing this full-time. I was doing it part-time during that 7-year period. So during the nights and weekends, that was Professor Messer time. During the day, I was the mild-mannered security systems engineer. And then on the weekends, it used to be, for those that remembered, these study groups were always on Saturdays. And that's why. Because during the week I had a job And then Saturday, at night, I'd create all the content. And then by Saturday, I had something to show you. And that's why we did them on Saturday. And then as soon as I did this full time, I moved it out of Saturday, so I got my Saturdays back. So that's why we do them on Wednesdays. And now Tuesday, Thursday for the A+ stuff. So it's all full time now doing this and focusing on this. So a little different than the world of systems engineering for sure. Where I used to travel the world, I'd be on a plane every week, multiple planes every week. Now I sit in a chair in this room. I don't move from this spot. It's very different than what I was doing before and having those there. For those in the chat room, the way the questions are worded is half the battle when it comes to Security Plus, in my opinion. Kyle in the chat room is not wrong. The questions are involved. It's almost like reading a little mini novel. If you've ever taken the SAT, if you've ever taken, if you've seen the preliminary tests, what is the test you have to take to get into law school? If you ever read those questions, it is a paragraph of a scenario. And then at the end, they ask you a question. This is why I didn't get into law school. They ask you a question that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what they just asked you. We went through an entire paragraph, and now you're asking me about what a color is. I don't know what you're talking about. I would have never done well in law school anyway, as it turns out. But that's the kind of a scenario on the Security Plus to a smaller extent, is that it's very long, involved questions in some cases, and they're asking very specific information, and they're expecting you to extrapolate and make a couple of jumps to be able to get to the answer. It's not a definition question. It's a lot of the questions like we saw today. Some of them are similar, like the performance-based question. That could be a drag and drop on the exam, I think. But that's more of a definitional question. There was only like one jump you had to make to piece together the authentication type with the authentication name. But the challenge is many of these questions are not even that straightforward. You have to make a couple of jumps, and you have to understand the abbreviations they're using and the acronyms to be able to even understand the question so that you can then make two more jumps and finally get to the answer. Now, that's by design in these questions. They are difficult questions. It's a difficult exam. Do not expect to walk into these exams without any study and do well. Even a seasoned security professional is going to have a challenge, because they're asking you some very specific things about technologies. And with security, nobody does everything. You might focus on one particular area and then touch others. So you really do have to do your studies. And you're right. A lot of the questions Kyle's mentioning is select the best, select the one that's most appropriate, select the one that's most secure. And you have to know what the differences are between those and be able to get that. So VA Brian says, thank you for the CertMaster CE. Yeah, you can really renew yourself in a couple of hours, in a few hours. I won't say a couple, but in a day, you could technically renew. Yeah, no CEUs. You don't have to take another exam. It's all from the luxury of your house on your mobile device or on your laptop. That's the way to do it to make that happen. Any tips / tricks to cryptography? Yes. I find for cryptography, it helps if I do it. The concept of cryptography, I could watch 1 million videos on asymmetric encryption. I could watch 1 million videos on hashing, and I still would not be able to figure out what they were really doing until I did my own cryptography with PGP. I created my own key pair, and I started using that key pair to send people encrypted messages and to digitally sign messages that were not encrypted, and to look at what the differences were in those things. And suddenly it started clicking for me to go, oh, I get it. I use this private key and I encrypt it and I send it out, and they can see what I encrypted, or I use their private key and they can now use their public key, or et cetera, et cetera. I use their public key and they use their private key, unless I'm digitally signing. And then I go, why did I use the different key for digitally signing? Oh, that's why. Because when I digitally signed, they're the only ones that needed to be able to see what's going on there. They're the ones that needed to verify along with everyone else. There's different ways to do these things. Unless you do them, you don't figure it out. Or I downloaded a file from a website that said, Here's my MD5 hash for this file. All right, I download the file from the website. I find some software myself that is able to provide me with the MD5 of a file. There's plenty of free software out there that do it, even things built into certain operating systems. I run my own MD5 hash on the file. It gives me the same hash. I've done it, and I get it. Finally, I understand how the hash is associated with that file that I just downloaded. So those types of things can be really, really helpful for understanding the fundamentals of cryptography. Now, once you get beyond that, you still have to remember all of these different hashing types. But at least the concept of how those things apply to the real world are no longer this nebulous, weird, it's a hash. Okay, I don't know what that means or how I would use it, but now I got to understand these things. But if you understand, I could use an MD5 hash to look at that file. I could use a SHA hash. Which one's better or worse and why? Now you're sort of taking what a hash is out of it and you're really focusing on the technologies. And I think that helped me. That might help you too for those. In the chat room, what kind of things can you do with a virtual machine? Somebody who's studying for their 902 exam, this is the A+ exam. The A+ exam talks a lot about Windows and really most of Windows. Windows, some Linux too. Both of those things are going to be important. Windows, you have to know where everything is. You have to know how to troubleshoot it. You have to know how to start up some of these tools and utilities. You have to understand Performance Manager, Event Viewer. You have to understand how to find all these things in the control panel. So a virtual machine is really, really going to help you, especially if you start looking, if you have Windows 8 and you've never used Windows 7, having those two operating systems, they're slightly different. It's nice to know where the differences are between them. You could even have two virtual machines up on your screen at the same time and do the same task in each one and see what the differences are. And of course, for those of you not familiar, Microsoft makes virtual machines available for free for lab use to do exactly that. You can find them at modern.ie. Like thoroughly modern Millie. That's a bad reference, isn't it? Nobody's even going to understand. Professor Messer's making Broadway references to try to figure out how to explain the word modern. Like the modern era. modern.ie. Go to modern.ie. And next we'll be doing Hamilton and Can You Hear the People Sing? We'll just start singing. We'll do all kinds of shows. And now from CATS, we'll discuss encryption. The key with doing this hands-on, though, in Windows is figuring out where things are. Sometimes on the exam, it asks you, how can you start this up? Where do you find this? And it helps if you know how to find those things. So a lot of it is, I call it muscle memory. It's kind of what it is because you kind of get used to clicking to get there. It's almost like when you're driving, you realize you've arrived at your destination and you can't actually remember the process of driving there because you were thinking of something else, but you're pretty sure you followed all the right rules of the road. It just becomes automatic. So it should become automatic in Windows to be able to start these things up. If somebody says, I need to find that event viewer. Oh, well, it's right here. Click, click, click. There's the event viewer. That type of thing helps too. And it does hurt that Microsoft keeps moving things around. They do. It's a challenge. They haven't quite figured out that we depend on them to put things in a place. And in fact, it's sort of a problem. So I was reading someone's entry on this. It was probably a Reddit message or something to this account. But now they've kind of created Windows 10 where they sort of have the newer style of Windows with the newer style boxes for their UI. I forget what they finally decided to call that UI, but they've got that UI. But then they've also got the older style UI where the things are still where we remember them to be. It's almost like, and they made this point, it's almost like they started to really change Windows and then everybody started screaming. And then they said, okay, we'll just leave them there. And now we kind of got two windows. We got like the newer settings or we got the older control panel. So we don't really have either one. We kind of got both. And now we're stuck with both of those things. So I'm not sure if that's good or not, but there it is for those things. Yes, they are transitioning to the new user interface. Of course they are. Now, how long does that take again? This could take some time. We've been transitioning to the new UI for some time. And Microsoft at this point, I don't know. Are they going to come out with a new new UI? Are they going to keep the existing? Are you going to start migrating things over to it? Are we at the new UI? Is this it? I wouldn't be too mad about that. I can still find things. I try to go into the new stuff, and sometimes I remember where it is, and sometimes I don't. Well, I haven't been able to commit to either one at this point. I'm starting to lose track of both of them now. So that's the real challenge. For those of you, I apologize. A number of you have seen me hitting my watch and checking my notes today. And my brother and his wife they are in labor. They are having a child. And any moment we are expecting to hear something. So if you've noticed that I've been occasionally glancing at my phone and you've heard my watch dinging, I don't want to turn it off. So I apologize for those of you that have sat through that. But that's why. It's not because I'm not smart enough to turn these things off, although that's partially true. It's because I'm waiting for that message to come through. Nothing yet. Nothing yet. We're waiting. We're going to get there. Yeah, I'll be the uncle for the second time there. He already has a kid. This is my brother's 4 years younger than me. So this is this his last kid? We'll see. I've already bought a bunch of good stuff to take. So as soon as we know, we're going to head down to his house and do all that. So this will be fun. We're waiting on that. So some excitement. Now that means that for those of you waiting for the rest of the 901 videos, there may be a bit of a weekend delay as I go see the new baby and dote on them for a while. But I'll be back next week. I'll be back on Monday, and we'll get those videos. Don't worry. All this is all good. It's not a problem to get that happening. Well, we've gone through another hour of Q&A. I think that kind of covers the bases. Thank you for putting up with me listening in from my phone and all the noises. Thank you for your Q&A in the first hour. We wouldn't be able to do Q&A unless you were here. So thank you for that. Thank you for hanging out a little longer and putting up with my talking over all of these things and fitting that extra question in at the end. I like to get in as many questions as we can. And that helps if we can cram them into that time frame. Thanks for your calls and your questions in the chat room as well. Hopefully it's got you on the right track for passing your Security Plus exam. You've got lots of options. Come back next month. We got more Security Plus. I'm taking next week off from taking any live streams. That last week of the month is my bye week. But at the beginning of April, we got 2A Plus. We got 2A Plus on Tuesday and Thursday. The first Tuesday and Thursday of the month is the A Plus Study Group. Network Plus Study Group the week after, Security Plus. It's all on the calendar. Have a look. Thank you for being there. Thank you for checking those. We've got plenty more Security Plus for you next month, though, with all new questions. You've never seen them before. Come on back. We'll do some more then. Thanks for joining us this time. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group.